Many operas are about journeys, often through landscapes shaped by myth, legend, or fairy tale. One recent example is the trilogy of operas by three different composers based on ancient Chinese folktales and the character Madame Whitesnake. A recording of the first part of the trilogy, called Naga, has just been released on the New World label. We'd like to welcome its Boston-based composer, Scott Wheeler. Thank you very much for being with us again, Scott.
Thanks. Great to see you, Chris.
Scott, I know you've spoken about this opera with us before. I tend to think of you, at least based on first impression, as a here and now kind of American composer. So what got you on this journey back to something like the Tang Dynasty in China?
Well, this is an opera libretto that is not just about ancient things, it's about modern takes on ancient things. Although we don't have cell phones or anything like that, and it's completely a mythic, timeless atmosphere that Cerise has created, and a language that is mythic and operatic in that sense. It's very, we feel like it's a modern take on the whole thing. You just have to listen to it to see that, and you read the libretto, and I think you get a sense of that. There's nobody who's quite come up with anything that reads quite like this libretto, I must say. It's an opera. When I first saw it, I said, wow, what do we make of this? It's a ritual, and then it's a murder. That's pretty good.
Right, there is certainly drama. I think one of the things that a lot of people look for in drama is they want something human they can relate to. You know, whether it's the Countess in the Marriage of Figaro or Aida. Where do you see that in this trilogy?
That's what a wonderful question. That's exactly how Cerise was looking at this.
This
The
is Cerise
first
Lim, who wrote the libretto. Cerise Lim Jacobs, right?
Cerise Lim Jacobs, yes, who's also a Boston-based person, as you know, and um, and the first characters we get are the couple, and they sing about their love, but he has a spiritual quest. He's a monk, and he has to leave his wife, who is going to give birth to the child after he leaves. Uh, and he's sad about that. But the snake sees him and falls in love with him, and she's an immortal and decides to go down and take part in the mortal world. And the monk gets rather obsessed with her too. It's almost a love triangle that's created there, which is very human indeed.
Well, he's on a spiritual journey. He wants to overcome illusions and attachments, but at the same time, there's this, I guess, compassion that comes into the mix toward the end of the opera in a rather fatal way.
Yes, of course. And the abbot has a lot to do with that, because the abbot is his spiritual master. He finds the master and tries to devote himself to that. And the question of what to do with the snake ends up becoming a point of conflict between the master and the monk.
Now, I have seen some of the video clips based on performances of this in Boston. They're quite spectacular visually, and people might say, because we've been spoiled by all these years of great music videos here, how can I possibly go back to just listening to a CD or an audio file?
Yes, I know, and it is a challenge, and we are spoiled. Um, what I always tell my friends when I give this to them, if I give them a CD, I say, don't try to sit and pretend you're at the opera and be bored because there's no visual. Listen to it instead in chunks. Listen to a scene, 15 minutes or something like that, and then take a break and say, wow, that was cool. I still remember that tune, or that little part of the music. It created an atmosphere. And you come back and you hear a different aspect of the atmosphere in the next scene. And eventually you get the sense. That's how I learned the magic flute. That's how I learned operas that I've never even seen. There are Janacek and Mussorgsky operas that I've never seen that are among my favorite operas, only based on the audio.
Because in your head, Mussorgsky, you see these crowds of people, coming in, they're frothing away here, or Magic Flute, you're seeing these crazy, almost extraterrestrial backgrounds. I mean, that's how people listen, I guess, right?
We do. We do. We provide a lot in our minds. It's not that different from saying, do you want to see the movie or read the book? You want to do both.
I want to ask you about crossing cultural boundaries. I mean, lots of composers have done that, sometimes in a good way, and sometimes ways we feel uncomfortable with. But in this particular case, you're working on part of a trilogy, but you're working with the other composers as well.
Well, we saw each other. We knew each other. Uh, Madame Whitesnake by Joe Long was written before the other two. Paula and I, Paula Prestini, who wrote Gilgamesh, and I, writing Naga, had Madame Whitesnake to listen to if we liked. But we all come from very different places. Zhou Long was born in China, trained in Beijing. So his music is truly, truly based in China. Cerise, however, has, well, although born and raised in Singapore, has spent so much time in Boston and is reaching out to so many different cultural places in these libretti that it's quite reasonable to say, okay, well, I'm the American, and Paula is the Italian, Mexican, American person coming in to the picture, and we all take our own part in looking at this material, which builds on William Blake and the Hebrew Bible and India and China and Japan. So it's a great combination of things, and you can all, I hope we can all approach it from our own angle, and that it all has some kind of coherence.
I know in writing it's not just about getting into a new culture that you might be less familiar with, but you're also drawing on Western operatic traditions. Which part of that was most important for you in this work, Naga?
Well, I think that the romantic, the Verdian finally came in at the end, where it got closest to that kind of opera, that kind of dramatic confrontation. It starts, to me, with Stravinsky, uh, and the ritual of the Stravinsky and Britten style, and then it moves into Handel. For me, in my head, I'm hearing the Handelian, uh, placing myself in an emotional place and singing a da capo aria. And Cerise gives me the structure of something like a da capo aria a couple of times, and I went with it. I said, that's a perfect thing to do. So we go from a very ritual choral place to a more Baroque opera place, eventually arriving back at the ritual almost like a Bach mass or a Bach passion, and leading into a Verdian murder. So if one can combine all of those things, uh, I think it's possible, actually, and the audience is simply drawn along by the play.
Of course, one of the things that I found really striking was in the depiction of the snakes in this opera. They are, transhuman or supernatural figures. And I'm thinking of Mozart with the Queen of the Night, this icy, glacial, almost inhuman, vengeful character.
And loving. And at
Yes.
the same time, it's out of love, and it's love that gets perverted. And the green snake is also such an interesting, because it's an intersex character. It's a genderless. It's a character that was a male, is now a female, or was a female. I mean, it's very confusing, and having it be sung by the countertenor Anthony Roth Costanzo, it creates an interesting midpoint in gender terms, but also in dramatic terms, for how the love triangles work.
Another thing that people really appreciate in opera, even just instinctually, is not just individual characters, but when you bring people together at some pivotal moment. I'm thinking toward the end of Naga. I mean, what was that like for you putting that all together?
Counterpoint. It's great. It's where the musical mind comes in and says, all right, I'm putting all of these people on stage. And you know, I've conducted a lot at the Cutler Majestic in Emerson because I've been teaching at Emerson College. And when I'm writing it, I put myself in the pit and I say, okay, over there's a character, over there's a character, and they're coming from different places. What's their music like and how does it combine? That's what Mozart does. If I can try to do it, then I will have somehow succeeded in this opera.
I also want to ask you if you were to describe the lure of this piece for someone who's never listened to an opera before, what would you start with?
How does one start if one doesn't have all the background? I, you know, I always just started with the tunes. Uh, when I had never seen I'd never seen a Wagner opera as a child, but I had a record of Wagner overtures and preludes, which I listened to a lot. And when I finally got around to seeing Meistersinger, I said, "Oh, I actually kind of know this piece." I I also had a songbook of opera arias, and I used to play through the Habanera from Carmen, and some of these other great tunes, and so I feel like the music is for many of us also. How many people those Met Saturday afternoon broadcasts learned their operas just by listening to those tunes on the radio, listening to bits of things and hearing how singable. And so the connection to the human voice is probably the simplest way to connect to any opera.
And you can even make a commercial from the Queen of the Night. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Chris, thanks so much. It's a pleasure. I'll see you soon.
Scott Wheeler, composer of Naga. We'll have more news in just a moment.